Hey, we just have this. President Trump, former President Trump, will be heading to the Texas border. I have accepted the invitation of Governor Greg Abbott to join him on an official visit to our nation's decimated southern border on Wednesday, June 30th. Looks like he's going to be Kamala Harris to the border. We just happen to have with us Governor Abbott right now, Greg Abbott of Texas. Sir, welcome back to Newsmax. Did you just get the news, or when did you find out he was accepting your invitation?
This is something that the president and I have talked about for a while now, and as he pointed out in his letter, it's something that I invited him to come down to the border to visit with the public about the border, because he set the high mark for what needs to be done on the border with building the border wall, with the Remain in Mexico policy, with the Title 42 policy, by sending a message that no longer could people come across the border illegally, that he was going to enforce the immigration laws. And, you know, it's amazing that we now have been through about 5 months or so of another administration. They have yet to come down to the border, either the president or the vice president, whereas President Trump was highly engaged, and he remained in active communication with me during the entirety of his presidency, in part because of his concern about border, but also because of his concern about the way that Texans and Americans were being impacted by this massive influx across the border. And one last thing, Greg, real quick, and that is, if you look at what President Trump was able to do in comparison to President Biden, it's astonishing, because last April, when President Trump was still in office, there were 17,000 people apprehended coming across the border. This April, under President Biden, there have been more than 170,000 people apprehended, so more than a 1,000% increase under the Biden administration. Obviously, President Trump was controlling the border far better than President Biden is.
Sir, you're going to step in, though. You're going to build the wall. You're going to step in and build a good chunk of this. But I want to show folks at home, there's a very long Texas-Mexico border, as you know, almost 1,300 miles. You don't need a wall for the entire length. Am I correct in that? There are lakes. There are certain areas where a wall would just make no difference.
Well, in addition to what you just said, also there are certain areas where either no one or really hardly anyone ever crosses the border. Conversely, Greg, there are other areas where there are an incredible influx of invaders coming across the border, and that's exactly why we need to build the border wall in certain strategic areas. And it's going to be tomorrow that I make the public announcement about exactly what the Texas plan is for building the border wall.
I want to take a peek at what it looks like right now. We've got, this is actually from, I believe, DHS. If you look, it's not the best, it's not exactly obvious, but the red is where we have wall or partial wall so far. So I know the big announcement is coming tomorrow, but what can you tell us? Give us a preview, how long, where, that kind of thing.
Well, again, those are issues, Greg, that I'm going to have to save until tomorrow, and you can report it tomorrow night. But just know that Texas has a plan to step up and continue the process of building a wall, because we need to help protect our fellow Texans from the unbelievable number of people coming across the border. All
right, so you're going to wait till tomorrow, but can you tell me this? How high?
It will be effective. Let me put it that way.
All right. Hey, it is astonishing that President Trump is coming back to the border. We love that. But that Kamala Harris, the vice president, we talked about it a moment ago. But, you know, there's a big difference between campaigning and governing. You know that. She should know that. Here she is in 2019.
But what does this president do? He virtually looks at those children and says, go back to where you came from. What do we have in this president? A policy that was about taking children, separating them from their parents, and calling it border security. No, that was a human rights abuse being committed by the United States government, and it is against the morals and the values of who we are as a nation.
Wow, talk about a virtue signal. It felt so good for her to say that, and then in Guatemala, a different tune.
To be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border, do not come. Do not come.
And she goes on to say that we will enforce our laws. In 2019, she was kind of blowing that off. So Governor Abbott, Let me ask you this. This has been a problem for a long time. You're just deciding to do this now. And I think Donald Trump changed the game. He said, this is actually feasible. We can do this. He didn't quite get it done. He tried. We know he got a lot of pushback. But why didn't we possibly try to do this earlier?
Sure. Easy answer, at least as far as I'm concerned, because every year that I have been governor, Texas has been providing almost $1 billion every biennium for border security using Texas National Guard as well as Texas Department of Public Safety officers. The need for that decreased under President Trump, for one, because President Trump enforced the immigration laws, but for another, because he began building the wall. And had President Trump been reelected, candidly, Texas probably would not have had the need to spend Texas taxpayer dollars on doing the federal government's job. It was only after President Biden got elected and suddenly changed building the wall and the Remain in Mexico policy and the other policies that were securing the border that required Texas to increase our effort. The first thing I did was in Biden's second month in office when I launched Operation Lone Star that deployed more than 1,000 Department of Public Safety officers, National Guard, where together they have arrested more than 1,500 people and have apprehended more than 35,000 immigrants coming across the border illegally. We have seen, however, that effort is not going to be sufficient, which is now why Texas is going to step up and take the next step and begin building the wall in Texas.
All right. Well, we know you'll host the president very well, and that should be a very interesting visit for both of you. Hey, Governor Abbott, you know, it's interesting. I've known about you, well, since you became governor, 6 years ago? But only recently, and I've been watching you for a long time, did I realize that you are confined to a wheelchair. A lot of folks don't know that, and I was surprised. I understand you had an accident in your 20s. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and has it
Sure.
how it's affected you? I mean, beyond the obvious, you know, your life dramatically changed.
Sure. Well, it's one thing you can't see through a TV camera like this. But yeah, I was in my 20s and I was out running. So I was an avid runner. And while I was out running one day, a massive oak tree crashed and fell down on my back and hit me in the back and crushed my vertebrae and my spinal cord, leaving me immediately and permanently paralyzed and needing to use a wheelchair ever since that time. But I got to tell you, I chose immediately not to be a victim, but to find a way to be a victor. I learned a very important lesson, and that is our lives are not going to be defined by our challenges. Instead, we define our lives by the way that we respond to those challenges. And it was after the accident that put me into the wheelchair that I went on to become a state district judge in Houston. I became a Supreme Court justice for the state of Texas. I became the longest serving attorney general in Texas history and now governor of the great state. Part of that is because of the resolve that I had not to be a victim, but part of it shows the art of the possible in Texas, showing that I live in a state where even a young man whose life is broken in half can rise up and be governor of this great state.
I love it, sir. Thank you for sharing that story. And, well, good luck tomorrow. We'll be watching and we'll report tomorrow night all the details. We appreciate it so much. Governor Greg Abbott, Republican of Texas, all the best, sir.
Thank you, Greg.
Recently, Facebook announced it will ban former President Trump's account for at least 2 years. Newsmax wants to know if you think that's the right decision. Should Facebook let Trump back on? You can vote in our poll. Text the word ACTION to 39747. We'll share the results on Newsmax TV, Newsmax.com, and with millions of Americans who want to know. Takes just a few seconds, so vote now. Let your voice be heard. Newsmax, real news for real people.